wonderful having this event today, and really would like to thank the IDEA team again, and the IDEA Committee. It's doing like absolutely amazing work. So proud with what we are doing, and I think that that this meeting, I'll be super quick. I just want to say that this meeting is particularly timely and importantly because it's a way also of reaffirming ASM unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion in STEM. Our mission is that of making microbiology the most welcoming, the most diverse, the most inclusive field. And for that, we have so many activities. And of course, this is making no short changes about the quality of science and the rigor in science and all that, but really ensuring that the power that comes from a diverse workforce of people who think differently, of people who had different experiences, it's an asset that for solving complex problems like what we do in science day in, day out, it's it's an asset that ASM is willing to cultivate and to support in every way possible. So this is super exciting, and I look forward to hearing from the speakers. So thank you for being here. Just as a moment of commercial or public service announcement, if you would like, soon after this meeting at 2 o'clock, there will be a town hall organized by our policy team on the outlook on the new Congress and the new administration. You should have you should have received an invitation. If you haven't, reach out to someone, send me an email or something. We'll figure out how to get you the link of where to go in case you haven't received. But really, thank you, and please stay engaged. We need you, and we need your expertise and your leadership to further the commitments that we want to have as an organization. So thank you so much. Back to you, Shannon and Gretchen. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Dr. Kohler and also to Stefano for being here with us. So it's a moment to hear from each panelist, and then we will have an open discussion later on. So it's my pleasure to introduce, and I will apologize first if I don't pronounce the names correctly, so you please correct me when you start your talk. It's my pleasure to introduce you IDEAA Donje. IDEAA has a bachelor and master's degree in microbiology and vaccinology, respectively. He's a member of the ASM Microbial Lead Task Force and is a dedicated advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion in microbial sciences. He also worked as ASM Young Ambassador to Nigeria and emphasizes in mentoring and empowering underrepresented groups in microbiology. So we thank him very, very much for joining us today. Please.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm IDEAA, and I'm a man wearing eyeglasses and sitting behind a blue background in a black shirt. So today I'll be talking about advancing microbial sciences through DEI and One Health, and talking about leadership perspectives for a global impact. So firstly, I would like to talk about the current state of DEI in microbiology. And I would like to start by discussing the progress achieved so far. So ASM has made a lot of progress with DEI, starting with the ASM Future Leaders Mentoring Fellowship, which has engaged over 1,000 people, including mentors and mentees from more than 50 countries, spanning from academia and industry. And also the ASM Young Ambassador Program, which I was opportune to be an ASM Young Ambassador to Nigeria from 2021 to 2023. And there are currently over ASM Young and Country Ambassadors from 114 countries, which has also improved inclusivity in sciences. And most recently, we started the ASM Microbial Leap program, facilitating the training of leaders, scholars program. And over the past 10 months, we've carried out 16 sessions on various DEI topics, spanning from unconscious bias to empathetic leadership. And I would also like to talk about the ABRACAMS, which is of note, which is the annual biomedical research conference for minoritized scientists, which ASM conducts annually. And these following initiatives have been able to address several disparities, such as underrepresentation of marginalized groups in leadership and research. And also it has eased barriers that we see amongst early career microbiologists, especially from historical excluded groups, with increasing access in funding, publishing, and also improving career advancements. And as such, long-term strategies are really needed to build a diverse microbiology community. And I would like to talk about what I see as the future of DEI in microbiology. The first thing is we need to improve on inclusive mentorship and pipeline development, programs to support diverse early career microbiologists through training and career progression needs to continue. And there's also a need for systemic change in STEM culture. That is, we should start thinking of addressing biases in hiring, promotion, and funding decisions, and also embedding DI principles into microbiology curricula and research practice. As well. And thirdly, there's a need for global collaboration. That is, we should build international partnerships based on shared scientific goal and overcome regional barriers, and also foster inclusive frameworks that would prioritize collective progress over external division. And I would also briefly like to mention the role of One Health in advancing microbial sciences. Firstly, One Health is a concept that integrates human, animal, and environmental health to address global challenges such as zoonosis and antimicrobial resistance. And the opportunities it brings for microbiologists is that it can enhance cross-sectoral collaborations, enabling impactful research, especially for early career microbiologists, and also it facilitates equitable knowledge sharing between high and low resource settings. And it also helps with capacity building. In the past, as a member of ASM Young Leader Circle, we have facilitated several One Health sessions in ASM Microbe, for example, the one I'm sharing on the screen, where we talked about One Health in microbiology and collaborated with the esteemed Training Association to increase awareness on One Health initiatives, and how it can improve research in microbiology and also enhance DEI while solving critical health issues. And finally, I would like to talk about some of the importance of DEI and how being a young ambassador has improved on capacity building in microbiology, especially in Nigeria. And in 2021, and I think currently, Nigeria has more members of ASM just behind the United States. And this is as a result of the work we've done in improving microbial sciences in the country, and also helping to facilitate workshops and training for early career microbiologists in the country, including historical underrepresented groups as well. And currently, Nigeria has 4 ASM student and postdoctoral chapters, which are continuing the work that we've done as the ASM Young and Country Ambassadors in Nigeria. And also, I've been able to facilitate the first outbreak exhibit in Nigeria, collaborating with the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History to create awareness about One Health in public, and also let the public know how outbreak occurs within the One Health spectrum of environmental, human, and animal health. And initiatives like the Young Ambassador and Young Leader Circle also exemplifies how early career scientists can champion DEI and influence the field positively. Thank you for listening. And I'll stop sharing right now.
Thank you very much. You've been doing a lot through, you know, the initiatives of ASN. So we look forward to know much more. And if people have questions at the end, we will discuss, especially those people that maybe want to emulate, right, what you're doing in Nigeria, collaborating with ASM in their own spaces and countries. So thank you very much, Yola. So we, as people, want to invite people to feel free to share their talks in the chat, while we, at the end, will have a Q&A session, open Q&A session. So as you share your talks, I want to welcome Dr. Wendy Todd. Dr. Todd is a professor of Indigenous Science and Occupational Endorsement at the University of Alaska Southeast, Juneau. Dr. Todd serves at various boards and committees to identify barriers to inclusion, such as social policies leading to marginalization, and identify methods to increase the racial and ethnic diversity of the ocean science workforce. Dr. Todd is also the founder of the Indigenous Geoscience Community, which is a sustainable community of Indigenous geoscientists. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Todd.
I want to start speaking to you in my language, Hadkil, to introduce myself formally. Hadalasis, et unthis onstigudele lagen, di hadas hatai hatagen, sonatlas stastis onai hatail de ijam, stakas kusturi lagen, di klingwai klikiele awiagen, skahlua hinudekeong, jatsai kith hinudek. Hikta handalais with ijam. So good people, I'm happy to be here with you today. I am Alaska Native Haida of the Haida Nation. I am Sonatlas Fish Egg Clan of the Sculpin House and Eagle. And one of the things I've integrated into my introduction is Diklingwai Klakila Awiagan. I am an observer of the world. I'm a Haida scientist. And I do that to encourage students to maintain that cultural identity of who they are as a scientist. Skahlua is my Haida name. It means to laugh while doing something precisely like peeling bark, so perfect for a scientist. My given name is Wendy Todd, and my people are from Heidelberg, Alaska. It's a village of 350 people in Southeast Alaska on Prince of Wales Island. And I'm going to talk to you today about science, technology, engineering, and math for all, focusing on using traditional and Western knowledge systems. And I'll share a little bit of my journey with you and some of the work that I've been doing. If I can advance my slide. There we go. So I am a geoscientist, meaning I started with microbiology and looking at microfossils forming in various hot spring environments. So working in Yellowstone, the deep sea off the coast of Hawaii and in Southeast Alaska. And I look at how microbiology at these sites are influenced by groundwater geochemistry, which is influenced by the rock. And so that's my science hat of what I do. I do a lot of work in education, specifically Indigenous education, using our traditional stories from my people and our language to teach science to our students and to use our stories to show that there's valid knowledge in our stories, okay? I also do a lot of work in policy. I was at NSF for 2 years. I'm working on the National Academies of Science panel right now for diversity in ocean sciences. I'm on the committee for AAAS education, and I work with our tribes as well in Southeast Alaska. And I do a lot of philanthropy work, working with the Indigenous Food Knowledges Network, ACES, as well as the president of Hadas Kilkwayas Foundation. And that's a group to preserve and save our language. We only have 5 fluent speakers of our language right now, so it's in danger. And so I have these 4 parts of my identity of who I am. But in the reality, okay, if I can advance my slide, this is what it looks like. It's not clear cut. Everything is, what I do in one space is impacting what I do in another. So it gets really busy sometimes. And I have to remember who I am. And I work a lot to maintain my cultural identity. And it gets hard to do sometimes because we get so busy and so passionate about what we're doing, we forget. And I know I forget sometimes who I am, and I have to step back and culturally center myself and maintain that Indigenous identity is really important, because I know that there are students out there. We have a lot of Indigenous students, and they're watching how we move through these spaces, and they're looking for mentors, they're looking for role models. And if we don't maintain that cultural identity, it's going to signal to them that they shouldn't as well. And we don't want that. I've had the opportunity to serve on the board of geoscience education, and took 2 years to get a diversity, an authentic diversity journal out. And what I mean by that is it's authentic voices. It's the voices of diverse scholars that are working in geoscience education and in oceanography. Again, those authentic voices of what we are doing in our communities, not what is being done to us. And those are two very different things. And in the whole time, I'm sitting here balancing the colonization structure that I've chosen to be in academia, and in the cultural responsibility that I carry every day. And so I have to balance that and move along a spectrum every day. Looking at barriers in science, especially for Indigenous peoples, we know that there's historical and intergenerational trauma, there's social drivers of health, there's differences in knowledge systems, access to education and traditional foods, social inequity, and connection to place. And so if you look at the figure on the bottom, here's the reality of the situation, okay? And then we talk about equality. And what that means is there's healthcare and education, okay? But if we can't access that, we have equality but not equity. So we have to be able to access that healthcare and education. And if we don't know where to look, it may as well not even be there. What we want in the end is liberation. We want access to culturally aligned health care and education, and everyone deserves that. We have to recognize that we all exist in cultures, whether we know we do or not. And people are always moving in and out of these cultures, and it matters to retain a diverse workforce in microbiology. One of the things I do with students is I look at how do we advance science, advance inclusion, and that's by introducing Indigenous science concepts of what is that to Indigenous students as well as non-Indigenous scientists as well. And these are concepts that are unique to traditional knowledge systems. So animacy, beinghood, humility, reciprocity, respect, cultural responsibility, which is so important. And we all carry that every day. And it's hard for people to understand when they have a different culture. The connection to all, and the difference between stewardship and a caretaker. So I've designed this model to look at the co-design and bridging of two knowledge systems. So in the middle, we have traditional knowledges, and this is red cedar bark, and it's woven. This is called a plate weave. And if we think of this as this whole sphere is traditional knowledge, and each plate in here, this is math, social science, microbiology, geology, water chemistry, and spirituality. And when I talk about spirituality, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about a connection to place. And so traditional knowledges are unique to every Indigenous culture. We have 5,000 Indigenous cultures on this planet. And within those 5,000, there are subcultures. And so we have thousands of traditional knowledge systems, okay? And they have been, they're thousands of years old. And they're all driven by protocols and practices of the community in which they're designed, spirituality, language, and cultural responsibility. So we come into academia with a different worldview. And so this out here, this outer sphere is Western sciences and how they're arranged individually, like kind of siloed. But I did overlap them because they're all, we don't have a pure science. We like to talk about it, but we don't have it. So an example would be, if we're looking at microbiology, what do we need to do? What do we need to know to grow bacteria? We need to know the chemistry, right? We need to know material science of what they'll attach to. We need to know the environmental science. We need to know math. So social science as well. So we tie all of these together to understand microbiology. And we teach the students on this outer rim what traditional knowledge is. So now we have this bridging pathway, and this Western science structure is again driven by language, cultural norms, spirituality, and cultural practices and protocols. And so we have our student, whether they're from a traditional community, indigenous community, or not, once we teach them these two ways of viewing the world, we're developing and increasing critical skill development. We're creating a workforce and scientists who can see not only the piece of science they're looking at, but the impact globally on what that science does. And with that, I'll tell you that the work I do is really, I love it. It's exciting. I work, so up here in SYNC, it's STEM for youth and Native communities. I work with Indigenous educators. We're working across the nation to build a framework that will be usable by many tribes. And what I mean by that is we're all working together. This is intertribal. We're building this based on the common needs that we all have, understanding that there are unique differences. But we can take this and say, here's the foundation, now you build on it. And so we're trying to do this collaboratively because every nation is trying to do this, but we don't get anywhere. So if we do this together, we can find our commonalities and celebrate our unique worldviews. I work with the Indigenous Women's Water Sisterhood. We are working to reclaim space on waterways for cultural ceremony. So in the city in Duluth, Minnesota, we've been able to reclaim a section of walkway, working with the city to design a cultural site for elders and to get to, and for ceremony of the Ojibwe people to be able to go and do ceremony, have classes, and understand the importance of the Indigenous people to Lake Superior. I founded the Indigenous Geoscience Community. We're going to have our next meeting in Juneau, Alaska in May. And what that is, I wanted to be really intentional with the words of using Indigenous. A lot of the times we hear Native, Native American, Indian. Indigenous is global. So this is unique to all Indigenous people, okay, globally. And we want to get together and share our unique worldviews in a safe space. And how does it relate and tie into our science identities and practice? I have founded All Nations Consulting, so I work with various education systems to do Indigenous evaluation, so that evaluation of programs is culturally aligned with the community that they're working with, not on, but with. And then finally, Voices. Been working on this program with my colleagues for almost 10 years, and we work across the nation with industry, federal agencies, and university professors to, again, bring that voice of diversity, that authentic voice into the room, and empower those voices that have been oppressed to speak up and to give them the tools to do that in a safe way. So with that, I will say, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Wendy, for all this information. So we look forward to know more and discuss during the Q&A. So for now, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Landon Getz to our conversation. He's a gay man and a molecular bacteriologist studying bacteriophages and their interactions with marine opportunistic pathogens, in particular Vibrio species. He recently founded the Pride in Microbiology, an international organization aiming to promote professional development, mentorship, and community among queer and trans microbiologists. Welcome, Dr. Getz.
Thanks everyone for being here today and hearing what I have to say about the organization that we founded. I'll start by saying that I use he, him pronouns, and today I'm a white man with glasses and blonde hair, and I'm sitting in front of a white background. I also would like to mention that I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is now known as Toronto. So I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Toronto, and I am working on a marine pathogen known as Vibrio parahemolyticus. Vibrio parahemolyticus causes disease in humans and in a number of aquaculturally important organisms, and so it's something that we're really interested in trying to treat. Antibiotics, of course, are only somewhat effective on these things, and so we are looking at bacteriophages as a potential solution to that. As sort of a first step, we're really interested in how bacteria, or these bacteria in particular, are defending themselves from phage infection. And so that's what my work is focusing on now, is really trying to figure out how the molecular mechanisms that these organisms use to defend themselves from these viruses. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is a little bit about some of my advocacy work that I've been doing as a volunteer, and sort of why I wanted to start these organizations. And so I think sort of with the other conversations we've had today, I think it's clear that science is not always a welcoming place for minority groups, and often to us LGBTQIA plus folks feel not super welcome or represented. And the example I like to use is an article I helped a student publish with the IDEAA DEI Committee about role models. And so Henrik was a student of mine who, like me, grew up in the early 90s and didn't really see himself represented as a gay man in science roles. He had a deep love for biology and science, but didn't really see it as a place that was for him. And he describes in this article that he met another gay man at a botanical garden in Copenhagen as a teenager, and this really showed him that he could be himself, be a gay man and a scientist, and that he didn't necessarily have to conform to stereotypes or fit into roles that he didn't feel like were for him. And so really, Henrik's story, among many other things that have happened in the last sort of 5 or 6 years of my career, have led me to begin creating a Pride in Microbiology network, a place where people can feel represented and welcome. I think it's important to mention that although the data for queer and trans folks in STEM is relatively low and sparse, we do have some, and most of it is a bit bleak. We know that LGBTQ plus people are 20% less represented than expected. LGBTQ plus students are less likely to finish STEM degrees than in other disciplines. They tend to leave STEM before they complete their 4-year undergraduate degrees. And almost half of LGBTQ people in STEM report that they're not actually out to all of their colleagues. And so they're actually hiding aspects of their identity at work in order to feel safe in the space that they're in. And so that's really where the Pride in Microbiology Network kind of came from. We wanted to be able to create a place for people to come together, meet each other, hopefully create opportunities for mentorship and other things. And so really the journey for the Pride in Microbiology Network started in 2023 with a collaboration with Nature Microbiology. And since launching in 2023, we now have over 150 members worldwide. As mentioned, this is an international organization. And so we do have members from around the world. It's largely a mentorship and community building initiative that's designed to enhance justice and belonging for queer folks in microbiology. We're now beginning to try to do sort of a 500 queer scientists-like thing to spotlight queer microbiologists, queer and trans microbiologists, and their career paths. Currently, we have bi-weekly coffee hours for people to get together, and with actually the ASM Young Ambassador Program, we were able to host an LGBTQIA plus STEM Day event this year, which was a research symposium that was well attended and really awesome, actually. And if you're interested in learning more about what we do, of course, I'll welcome any questions here today. But we also have a website, which you will be able to find through Google, and we have a mailing list and a Discord channel. So if you'd like to join, get in touch, keep in touch, that's where you can find us. And with that, I think I will end, and I'm happy to take questions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your talk, Landon. So let's go directly to the open Q&A so I will ask here the participants to ask their questions. You can open your microphone. If you are too shy, you can write it in the chat and we'll help you. So whatever you like, please, we can make any questions to any of the panelists today. Do we have anyone? Otherwise, I will start while people start to make their questions. I would like to ask all of you if you can speak briefly about what do you think, for those people that said to you that DEI efforts are not important, what is your approach for them. And I would like to make this question for all of you because you come from different places, right? And you have different perspective globally, etc. Can you expand on your thoughts on that? Landon, do you want to start?
Sure,
Okay.
I think I can. The question is just to make sure that I caught it. Okay, is that
What do you say to people that
thank
right
you.
now it's saying that DEI efforts are not relevant, especially
Yeah.
for microbial sciences or science?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think in part it comes from the data that we do have. I mean, we don't have a lot of data on queer and trans folks in STEM, but we do have some, and like I mentioned, it's not particularly great. And so I think there is a sense that we can use some of the data to try and convince people that there is an underrepresentation problem and that it needs to be addressed. I will point out that not everyone will respond to that well. I suppose not everyone will see the underrepresentation as a problem. But I think for me, the way that I've tried to handle it mostly is through personal experience and I suppose empathy. I think for me, it was very difficult going through undergrad, not having mentors or people that I felt I could connect with. And feeling like you have to hide an aspect of yourself to enter these spaces is a really challenging thing and not something that people do very well with. And so I think yeah, that's usually my motivation, at least for sharing personal stories, is to try and reach out in an empathetic way.
Thank you, Landon. Anyone else want to comment on one of the panelists? Because we have other questions.
I will
Okay,
briefly.
thank you.
And yeah, talking about, and we're hearing this is all political now of DEI or DEI hire and, all of that. And in the work that I do, I think of it as, we've been talking about this for 10 years, that there's a change in the demographics of the United States, and we're going to see a response to it. And that's what we're seeing now is this response. And when there's a change in who has power and privilege, there's fear that comes with that. And so we're dealing with the fear part of it now. Rather than celebrating the diversity, we're trying to oppress it. And deal with this a lot in indigenous knowledges as well, of the dismissive and deficit language around other knowledge systems. But to think that there's only one knowledge system, come on, that's based in, to me, it's based in racism. And so there's a fear of losing power and handing it down. But really, we should be celebrating this and recognizing that, everyone has the right to learn microbiology and to be in the career and to do it in a safe space and in a safe way. And so to me, we're going to see this continue until people figure out that they're not in any danger. And I think of it as, I don't know if you've heard of it, like there's the brainstem, the limbic system, and your prefrontal cortex. And when we change how people view the world and how they navigate through the world, they go into a fight or flight response. And so that's what we're dealing with, is this fear that's not logical. And so we have to approach it differently to show people that we're coming into these spaces with the best of intentions for our people and for the planet, and not to take power or privilege away from anyone. And so I guess that's my response to that, is really recognizing the behavioral responses to this rather than, politicizing it.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yola?
Yes, thank you. So one of the things I would like to just add to what has been said is that the problem is that microbiology addresses global health challenges like vaccine discovery, antimicrobial resistance, and many a times, these challenges, for example, like the recent pandemic we had, the COVID-19 pandemic, people had mistrust against, the vaccines that were able to tackle them. And from my own perspective, if we don't have, a diverse scientific community that could, communicate, these issues of vaccine and pandemics to people, we won't be able to reach diverse population that actually need to, benefit from these sciences. And when I hear the statement that DEI is irrelevant, these are things that I like to put into consideration, that we need diverse scientists to reach diverse population. That is, it's just as simple as that. So, and the concept of DEIA also is very like funny to me, because I would say that people from historical excluded group actually work harder to prove themselves that, you know, they deserve to be where they are. Like they work twice as hard as normal people should do. And I don't think there's anything like DEI. I feel like wherever anyone that has been excluded, you know, find themselves, wherever position they find themselves, they've actually worked hard to get to that position. So that's just what I would like to add to that.
Thank you. We have a question for Dr. Todd, specifically asking here. So what about, I mean, can you expand more about the challenges and issues on maintaining identity?
Sure. So I like to think of this as if you think back on that model that I showed you of traditional knowledge is in the middle, and then stepping out into a Western education system. When we move from that traditional space, whether it be our, our home on the reservation or in the village or wherever we're at, we're considered sacred to our people, and we're the generation learning and teaching. Okay, and we're moving into being the matriarchs and knowledge bearers. But when we move into a Western space, how does society define who a Native American is? We're drunk, we're poor, we sell fireworks on the side of the road. Those are the narratives, and there's romanticized stories of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and there's all of this thought of ownership of Indigenous identity in Western culture. Okay, we're mascots, we're cartoon, anything you think of that's negative, it's there, and it's always under the guise of honoring us. And that's not honoring us. You're taking our culture and you're changing it into something that's grotesque. And so when our students step into these spaces, they've never experienced that before. They're treated less than. And there's fear around that. So what they do, and I know I did it. So for 18 years, I cut off that Indigenous side of who I was. I quit speaking language. I quit dancing. I quit going home to the village. And it was tough because that's, we're cutting out part of who we are to be in this space, to learn. And with the goal with me was to go back home, go back into the village and figure out how I can work with and help Indigenous people. And not until I was beginning graduate school did I start tying these parts of my identity together, because I wasn't healthy. It was, I was mentally sick from it because I missed home. I missed my culture that I grew up in. And I went home and started to learn to integrate these parts and starting to heal and realizing I can be both. And I can help other students who are in these spaces understand that it's important to maintain our identity, our cultural values, our cultural responsibility. And once you decide who you are, stand in it. Because you can't be a scientist on one side and a community member on the other. It will literally tear you apart. So it's really important to maintain those intersections of our identity, whatever it is. And because we won't move through the space productively if we don't. And it does cause depression, racial battle fatigue. It causes all these issues that keep us from learning and being productive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks very much. Stefano, you have any question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. Great, great presentation. I have lots of questions. I limit myself to one. If there's room, I'll ask a second one. The first question I have is for Wendy, and maybe it is a little bit out of the great topic of identity and protecting that you discussed. But at ASM, we're very focused right now in our strategic roadmap on engaging the people that are in our branches around the country. 35 we have one in Alaska as well. And I'd be extremely interested in your perspective as a scientist, in Juneau, if I'm not mistaken, from where you are. So, far away from, a lot of the big academic center in continental US or so, what do you think we as ASM could be doing that is most valuable to engage indigenous people and people who may be in Alaska, in University of Virginia, or in other, areas that may not be as connected, that you find, if you have like three things that would be the most important thing that we could do to really make them part of the community for what they are, and not asking them, to become something else or travel somewhere else or do things that they may not be in a position of doing. So you had that image that I've seen before, of the stepping stools, right? So if you allow me a parallel, how can we give the people in setting like yours, what would be the most valuable thing of providing an ASM stepping stool? What would that look like?
Sure. Thank you for the question. One, what I was thinking of when you were talking is the collaboration with tribal colleges. Is there outreach to those spaces? That's the first way of engaging with Indigenous scholars. There's Haskell Indian Nations University, which is one of our bigger tribal colleges, and there's several across the nation. So reaching out and working with those colleges is the first way of doing that. Second would be at your ASM conferences and sessions, do you have an Indigenous section? At GSA, Geological Society of America, and American Geochemical Union in the last 5 years, we've started working collaboratively because there's a lot of Indigenous geoscientists coming into the space now. And we now have sections and mixers that bring all these Indigenous people together. And all the sessions are about Indigenous science in geosciences, microbiology, earth, climate science. So do you have those spaces, safe spaces at your meetings and convenings? And third, do you have role models speaking? And are you working with, when we do this work, we have to think also of who has authority to speak. And a lot of times in Western culture, it's who has the PhD or the master's degree, but our cultural practitioners have that same value. They just don't have the Western degree. And so acknowledging the knowledge that these people carry and bringing them into the spaces, and that's the power sharing part. I don't have the right to talk to any other tribe about their knowledge, but I can find someone who can and bring them into that space. So I guess that would be the three that I would think of is, are we creating, reaching out to the organizations that are already there? Like there's ACES as well, SACNIS societies. Are you creating spaces at your meetings, and are you working with and bringing in those cultural practitioners? And it's really important too, because if you're going to host those folks, then there's groundwork that has to be done within the organization to understand who you're bringing in and to do so respectfully.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Wendy. Very helpful.
Yeah. So we'll stick around for a few minutes. We know that this is very interesting. People are asking questions, so let's do that. We have an open question for any of the panelists who want to answer. It's about how did you measure success in these DEI initiatives that you're engaged? And if you think that currently DEI metrics are good or they should be redefined. Does anyone want to share thoughts on that?
I don't.
This is
I guess I'll speak
sure,
about that. Really.
Sure.
Oh, did someone else want to talk? I'll stop.
No, I don't think Yola or Landon. No, I think it's you.
Okay, so I guess for the metrics, I don't know if they should be redefined, but they should be done authentically and with meaning. Okay. And so from that, what I mean is when I worked at NSF, every proposal comes in with a cover page, and that cover page gets scanned by a computer. And the statements of diversity, so they can say LGBTQ, African American, Native American, Hispanic, those words get tagged, and that proposal gets counted as a diversity proposal. But when you read the proposal, there's no money, there's no infrastructure in working with those communities. But it's that superficial language and without meaning. And so we need to be more sincere about what we're funding, where we're working. Are we really intending to do this work with people and to do it in a sensitive, caring, ethical way? So I think being more, I don't know if it's strict, but making sure people are intentional about what they're doing, because when they don't do that, so you have these metrics coming out from NSF saying, 50% of our funding in diversity is going to Native Americans, but in the reality, maybe 5% of that work is being done with Indigenous people. And so what you see is this massive amount of money going into Indigenous education, but it's not changing. There's not more Indigenous people coming into that space. And so what happens? You cut the funding to those programs because it's not working. But we're not checking with the researchers to say, are you really doing this work with this group of people, disabled, low socioeconomic status, whatever it is? And a lot of times we see it's not. So rather than redefining, make sure people have the best of intentions, not just to get money. Because a lot of times diverse people, our populations are used to build careers and to get funding. And that's not what we're here for. We're human beings too. And we work with you respectfully and we expect the same in return.
Thank you. And that's why I think it's important that the IDEA approach at ASM have the A for accountability, which is something that is very important for the DEI initiative. Yeah. So we have Jose Perez. Jose?
Hi, Gretchen. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay. Excellent panel. I am working with the federal government, and we have seen some diversity data that, as Wendy mentioned, needs some meaning to that, because still low participation from minority groups. I will encourage Wendy to submit her credentials for the next call of ASM Distinguished Lecturers. As a former president from a branch, I was looking for a scientist that could be a model into the diversity of science. Wendy considered that. And as we approach changes in governance, that is not over. Politics are over. We move into governance as most of the people, as the majority of the people decided. I am not advocating for either side, but let's consider the diversity has been a word that helped to solve a lot of situations, because I also, when I was younger, I was hiding from an unfriendly environment, and that's it, 1986. So, and just by being Hispanic from Puerto Rico. So.
Thank you, Jose.
Okay.
And thank you for that suggestion. I want to clarify to Wendy, I don't know if you know the Distinguished Lecturer Program, but the suggestion is and we talk about this, right? Like having more people that also can talk about these topics in the Distinguished Lecturer Program. Thank you, Jose, for that suggestion. Do we have any thought about that, what Jose is commenting from Yola or London? I think they have similar experience, especially London have similar experiences.
Do I get to ask another question, because my other one was for Landon? No, I can't hold back, but I want to make sure we're running out of time, Gretchen.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I'll just quickly mention that I share similar experiences to Jose. I grew up in sort of the late 90s, early 2000s in a relatively small conservative city in Canada. And so I have similar experiences of having to hide who I was as a matter of safety. So I can recognize that, and I think it's related to what Wendy was saying a little bit about hiding identities and what that does to a person. I think it's not a very healthy way to live, and so unfortunately, it's a reality for a lot of people, and it was for me. But hopefully we can get to a place in the world where we can be a little bit more open, and that has happened for me. I have been able to connect my identities. So, but Stefano, if you have another question, I'd be happy to answer it.
No, I didn't want to occupy more space. I did not understand whether
No,
we're
I
wrapping
think
up or not. That was
we have some time. We have 5 minutes before we
very
end.
quickly, Landon. I was very intrigued by what you said about how difficult it is to be a member of the LGBTQ community in science. And that is always something that surprises me because I always think of the scientific community to be, by definition, open to new ideas, are open to people who bring those new ideas, and they're often diverse and things that are different. So I would think there is a way of thinking and behaving that should be very conducive to embracing diversity in general. And so, can you be specific? I mean, without being intrusive, right? Obviously, but is there any lesson that we can learn in ASM leadership of what do we need to pay attention to specifically that may be barriers for the LGBTQ community in science?
Sure. I mean, I understand the thought process behind why you think that scientists might be more open to these ideas. In my experience, I actually find a lot of scientific circles to be kind of quite socially conservative. While they may be quite open to different ideas, there tends to be a kind of in-group mentality. And so I think that's where a lot of the tension comes from. I think science is still, unfortunately, very masculine, very heterosexual in sort of its approaches, but also in the makeup of it. And so because of that, there are certain things that therefore exclude people who don't fit in those boxes. And I think it can often be small things. So it's not always necessarily overt homophobia. It can be, sort of small microaggressions that build up, right? So having to constantly come out to my colleagues, for example, is always a challenge because it occupies a lot of mental space to decide whether or not I should and whether or not that's something that could be a challenge. And so I think that's sort of what I was getting at. I hope that answers your question a
Oh,
bit.
that's fascinating to see how you perceive, how you see scientists as
Yeah.
being very open with ideas, but then when it comes to behaviors in relationship, that's not it. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Well,
Sure.
thank you very much for all the panelists, Stefano, Teresa, all the IDEAA staff and ASM staff that was here. So thank you very much for this first approach that we have online. I think we have very rich discussion and very diverse topics. So I want to just wrap and then say let's hope for a next one, and thank you very, very much.